Hello everyone, it's Pojo. We're back with some more card breakdowns. I have looked at these cards on Twitch already, and I did it live, and I recorded it and everything, but I didn't like the recording too much, and also I had a little bit of a file failure, so I figured rather than go through the trouble of importing it from Twitch and trying to figure out editing and get everything like set up that way, I'd just do a re-record, and that way I'd get like a bit more filtered on my thoughts, and we could do something a little shorter, a little more high quality in terms of video, because recording just from Twitch tends to get a little bit sprayy. In any case, what we have here is a series of new cards. I am going to bookend them with a rare, a draft rare, and an extremely exciting control legendary. But we have a cycle of 5 new legendaries, all of which are low-end units that have an ultimate ability in their respective hybrid factions. Those cards are pretty tricky to evaluate, and so they're always a little bit difficult. Like, I think that actually they're some of the hardest cards in the game to evaluate, just because you can very easily evaluate them on their stat line, and all of their stat lines are very good, but their actual abilities, it's something that you have to really sort of weigh carefully on, and it's really interesting. I think that most of them have very, very good ultimates, so we will talk about those in just a second. First things first, though, Relentless Gore. Relentless Gore is a 3/3 revenge. Summon your other Minotaurs, get +2 strength in Shadow. So, couple things about this card. Argenport is definitely the only colors where Minotaurs exist. We haven't seen that many Minotaurs yet. Grinva is a Minotaur, but we have some other cards like Oryx Sentry, Copperhall Bailiff, Minotaur Grunt, and a pile of others. The Treasury Gate avatars are Minotaurs. I think none of those cards are super strong and ranked at the moment, so having some sort of strength bonusing buff, or strength bonus buff here, is interesting and potentially good, but also very curious. So Relentless Gorehorn gives things like Minotaur Grunt +2 attack, and that actually puts them in a position where they're still not vanquishable, but they are much more threatening. Does the same thing with Oryx Sentry, makes it into a 3/5. Copperhall Bailiff goes up to a 4/3, which is pretty solid. Like, overall, like, the extra +2 strength really matters on the different Minotaurs, so it can be very strong, particularly in a draft environment. In order to see if this card is good in a ranked environment, I think we have to see a few more Minotaurs, but I'm interested. It seems like a kind of an interesting one, and by and large, I'm mostly just interested because this is a really cool draft card, and like, I'm always excited to see more like different draft ideas being explored. So this is a rare that you pick up early or you pick up late, and then you go, huh, maybe I'm going to pick a bunch of Minotaurs this time. And like, there are a lot of these different sort of divergences in the Eternal Draft archetypes, and they really lead to interesting decks. Like, you can follow a lot of very strange lines in drafts. You've seen me do this. We've done run 5 colors. We've run like insanely weird stuff. You know, you can follow static bolts all the way down. You can do all sorts of weird different paths. You don't have to just pick an archetype and stick with it because it's your favorite colors and pick just the best cards. So the draft archetype in Eternal is really, really strong, and set to all of the commons, uncommons, and rares that have been released have been like, oh, these improve draft. These make it better. And like, I was already under the impression that the draft format for Eternal was like the best I've ever seen in a set, like Magic or Eternal or Hearthstone or otherwise. It's just really, really good. So yeah, Relentless Gorehorn, kind of a winner for me on that front. I don't think it will see a lot of play in ranked. The revenge ability is really interesting. I like that basically, like, you summon this, you get that cool summon bonus, and then you get to revenge that summon bonus over and over again. So you can Dark Return it, you can, after you get it off the top of your deck, it has Destiny, so you can Dark Return to play it for free, and like, you know, that's another +2 to all of your Minotaurs. So you can sort of build that and snowball it and do some really interesting things with it. Gorehorn is an interesting card. I don't think it's strong in ranked, but we can see if there's a deck that can be built around it. And I think Minotaurs.deck could potentially be okay. We'll see, but most of the cards there are not ranked staples, with the exception of perhaps Copperhall Bailiff, which tends to be reasonably strong. Oryx Sentry, kinda as well. A little bit anyways. And yeah, you can maybe do some fun things with Treasury Gate. So Anyways, that's our sort of least exciting card of the spoiler set. Let's move on to the legendaries. There are 5 of them, and we have numbered them 6 through 10, as it turns out, because yeah, they are in fact numbered. First off is Kothon the Far Watcher. Kothon the Far Watcher is an endurance ultimate, pay 6 to give Kothon flying and play a 4/4 owl with flying. So 2/3 endurance, 4/2 is not a bad stat line. It's actually pretty good. You get something that is good at being defensive while still pushing for damage. It's got enough health to be kind of annoying to aggro decks. I think that in general all of these legendaries do some things to make Rakano a little bit sadder, and that's really good. Like, you kind of want to dilute Rakano's strength in the next set because you want to really encourage the play of the other faction pairings. And like, you want to have everybody have some sort of cool unique answer to Rakano and to like the Stonescar tokens decks. You don't want basically to go into set 2 and be like, okay, what is the setup look like? It's these 3 control decks and Rakano and Stonescar again. So like, we're seeing some cool legendaries that are pretty good at establishing a foothold against these types of decks. And endurance units are good weapon holders. They're pretty good, like, just solid units. This as a legendary is pretty exciting. And the ultimate ability is pay 6 for a 4/4 owl and a flying unit, which is to say, like, you don't get as much as you'd get out of, say, a Great Parliament, but the extra flying ability is something that you'd certainly be willing to pay 2 for on a 2/3 with endurance. And the 4/4 owl for 4 is something you'd usually be willing to pay for on a Great Parliament. And the main thing about that, and the main thing about all of the ultimates that these legendary units have, is that it does not cost you a card. That actually is what adds a lot of extra value to these. So the easy way to sort of describe it would be if you put draw a card on every single one of these ultimates, like just on top of whatever it already does, then you would sort of get a basic idea of what's going on. You could also say draw half a card if you wanted to kind of evaluate it from that respect, because it is something that gets you card advantage, but it plays a card that, or it plays an effect that is not as strong as a card that you might play. So it's a little overcosted, but it doesn't cost you any cards, and you get to basically have a fuller hand as a result. Kothon the Far Watcher is the first of these examples. The value that he gives you is pretty good. He's very good at sort of pushing out the slow control archetype, pushing the flyers across, and being pretty good at just the general Huru control style. He exemplifies the archetype in a pretty decent way. The 4/4 owl is mono green. Kothon is also the only card that does not have a double influence requirement. The rest of them do, but this card costs 2, so it would be kind of ugly if it did have a double green. That's something interesting to note. Just a little design thing where they kind of ditched the symmetry of the cycle in order to make something a little bit more playable. And Kothon is very playable. I think he's a really solid card, and I think that he does pretty well in just slowing down the game, getting to this position where you can sort of leverage some advantage. Does some similar things to cards like Feln Bloodcaster. Basically just is a dude, makes other stuff happen, builds the board slowly, does that pretty well. And yeah, makes good use of your turn 6. So, interesting card, very, very cool. Number 7. Number 7 is the Skycrag card. Unless I have messed it up. It's Vadius Clanfather, and his art is a little bigger, so we'll have to size it down, or at least just move it. Yeah, let's just move it out in front. Okay, so Vadius Clanfather is a 3/2 quick draw Aegis. Ultimate pay 7 to play a Steelfang Chakram on Vadius. If you don't know what a Steelfang Chakram is, it is a 4/0 entomb weapon that when it entombs, which is to say when either Vadius is destroyed or the Steelfang Chakram is destroyed, it gets put back into your hand. So you can play it again for 4. So with these cards, we want to evaluate the baseline first, because the baseline is very good. And then we want to talk about the ultimate, because this card needs to sort of be playable as a small unit in order to get to its bigger benefit, unless the bigger benefit is so good that you want to play the small unit anyways. Like, if you're playing only for control purposes, then yeah, you have to question like whether or not you want to play this card. But like I think that in terms of just playing a sort of aggressive strategy, Vadius Clanfather really supports that very well. He's an Aegis unit, which is good because it shows that Skycrag has an Aegis aggro archetype, which is to say you have the Snowcrust Yeti, that 2/1 Aegis that we've just seen. You have a lot of other like blue aggro units that have Aegises. You have red weapons that are just kind of scary in general, and then some of the hybrid cards appear to have Aegis as well. So Vadius Clanfather is a pretty nasty card that not only is fairly hard to block, but also fairly hard to kill with spells. Those two things means that he pushes damage extremely well. And that's pretty important because if you're putting a bunch of weapons on him, which you very likely are, he's going to push that damage, and it's going to be really hard for your opponent to deal with him. He's about as obnoxious as like cards like Silverwing Familiar. He's got some things going on, like, you know, if you combine Silverwing Familiar and Rakano Outlaw, you get something like this, except it doesn't have lifesteal. So, like, that kind of aggression, that kind of, like, forward movement is really important. Vadius is not very good at defending himself. He's okay if you manage to equip a good weapon on him, but in red and blue, you're not going to find much to buff his health. So the main things that he does is he interacts really, really well with spells, and he interacts really, really well with units while on the attack. And that's two things that you kind of expect Skycrag to do. But Skycrag is starting to look like a very solid aggro archetype now with Champion of Fury, the new Yetis, Vadius Clanfather, all of the standard red stuff. Oni Ronin's Shogun's Scepter is really strong here. Ornate Katana is really good here. Basically, a lot of good red stuff can be played on Vadius, and it'll make him pretty crazy. As for the ultimate, Steelfang Chakram is a really fun card, and so I really like that this card makes Steelfang Chakram, because at the moment it doesn't see a lot of play. It's kind of a good card with tokens, and a good card with like Aegis units too. Like, it's a good card in general in terms of just like giving you an overall inevitability that will eventually win you the game. And when you're paying 7 in Skycrag, like if you get to 7 in Skycrag, that's what you're looking for. You need something to give you inevitability and to like force your opponent to have harder responses and add more value to all of the units that you are playing, especially the Aegis units. So Steelfang Chakram is a card that you desperately need, and you're paying 7 to play one and get one, and that's really, really good. And the thing that I like about it is that, like, you wouldn't play Steelfang Chakram usually. Like, it's not a very common card, but this card basically forces you to play it. It creates it as a token, or it creates it as a card that you have off of your ultimate. And so that means that you get to have a lot of fun with Steelfang Chakram, but you don't like feel bad for running Steelfang Chakram in your deck, I guess, would be my sort of estimation of it. Like, it's such a good play pattern. It's such a load of fun to play. Vadius is really interesting in that respect. And as an ultimate, it's something you're going to want to be doing in Skycrag. So, yeah, Vadius, really cool sort of defining type of champion type character. Combined with the champions, we now have like 2 really solid cards in rare and in legendary that will kind of really support these opposing color archetypes, and that's really important. Okay, next up is the fun one, the really fun one. It is number 8, which is to say Bartholo, Ayan. I remember this guy's name. Got an O. Why can't I see it? Hold on. It should be right there. I think I've just got the wrong... I think I've just got it numbered wrong. It's in here somewhere. We'll find it. There it is, yeah. It just doesn't have the right name. Diogo Malaga. Okay, so Diogo Malaga is a 3/5 charge. With ultimate, pay 8 to give Diogo and all units in your deck double damage and charge. That ultimate's real exciting, and so we want to talk about that first, but let's go ahead and do the vanilla bit first. 4 cost for a 3/5 in hybrid colors. That card's very hard to kill. Like, It's pretty solid in terms of just stat line. It's the Steward of the Past stat line. And the one thing that Steward of the Past often dies to is Annihilate. Or Suffocate, of course, but like Suffocate, Vanquish, we tend to call that one a wash, basically, when we're considering how removal resistant a card is, because everything dies to either Suffocate or Vanquish. But being resistant to Annihilate, having a stat line that gives you a lot of health, basically being just big enough to deal with most of the units that people can play down, and also that charge ability. It is something that can push for 3 damage and then live to tell about it and be defensive later on, which is really interesting from the Praxis perspective. I think it really exemplifies this sort of really fun Praxis style, which is just excess and just delightful excess. Like, everything that Praxis does is really like fancy and flashy and just glorious in so many different ways. Diogo Malaga is a card that is a guitar-wielding explorer. The man looks like something out of Mad Max. The art is absolutely amazing. Just to check that out, like we can just show that off right now. It's pretty special. We got some fancy looking guitar stuff. This lighting and this staircase here, this twisted staircase, is really interesting. Like, I think it just really frames the picture very well. Diogo is just pretty cool. He's currently highlighting the Eternal setup, which says that set 2 is coming soon. So I'm expecting it this weekend, was my thought, but it might be next weekend instead. We will see. In any case, 3/5 charge, very good stat line, weirdly not as aggressive as most red cards, but the survivability is what really makes that cool. So he's kind of different from most red cards, and that's really neat. Okay, but the ultimate. Pay 8 to give Diogo and all the units in your deck double damage and charge. Diogo doesn't get a lot of benefit from this. He becomes a 6/5 for 4, which, not too bad. But the main thing about it is that everything else in your deck getting double damage and charge is insane. You don't get immediate benefit from it, but if you're playing a warp deck, you're pretty likely to see immediate benefit from it next turn. If you're playing with cards like Praxis Outlaw, if you're playing with basically any type of red card, everything in your deck really wants to have double damage and charge, and that's really strong. You can play this, like, if you want to go super ham with this, you can play this with Soulfire Drake. It'll be a 5/2 flyer with double damage, and then after it dies, because everything else in your deck has double damage and charge already, it'll all get flying, so you'll all have everything with double damage, flying, and charge. That feels pretty solid. I would say that's pretty okay. Yeah, so Diogo ends games. This is the ultimate that not only gives you a level of inevitability, but also just like completely crushes your opponent as far as like overall setup. You do not want this ultimate to land, and if it does, you have to end the game against Diogo before Diogo pulls cards off the top of his deck, because it's very, very hard to establish any sort of bulwark against a bunch of double damage charging units. And in a Praxis Warp deck, those cards are just going to be getting played off the top of your deck like that. Snap, snap, snap. All of them running at your face, all of them smashing into your Sandstorm Titans and killing them dead. Like, you have so many cards that have like 3 or 4 damage. Cards with Overwhelm like Copper Conduit and Amber Monument are very, very strong here, because if they have double damage and Overwhelm and charge, that's just a perfect combination. Like, any sort of recursion effects, also pretty good. You can use like things like Excavate, like right before you ultimate. There are some interesting things that you can do to like play around with this mechanic, and Diogo just basically, he makes every card in your deck really fun. So he's a spectacular design. He's potentially a very powerful card, and he is really good art, so just wins on all fronts. Very fond of this card. It's pretty delightful. Okay, number 9. Number 9 is Ayan the Abductor. Ayan the Abductor is sort of the inverse of Diogo. Diogo has maybe the weirdest stat line for 4, because he's a 3/5. He's a little bit iffy in terms of just like how much damage he can deal, what he adds to the team. I think he is very powerful in terms of stat lines, but of the 5, I'd say he has one of the weakest stat lines. or at least stat lines with abilities, because he doesn't really have, he's only got one ability, and it's an ability that takes place once and then doesn't give you as much of a like huge bonus. Ayan the Abductor, however, is probably the strongest of the different legendaries in terms of just sheer stat line. He's a 3/3 lifesteal ambush. Obviously, this card getting played down into a torch is a bad deal, but if you're going to play with this card, you're not going to play it into a torch. You're going to play it pretty smartly, and you're probably going to play it into an Oni Ronin or a Crown Watch Paladin or a Rakano Outlaw on a turn when your opponent does not have power available, or when you know that your opponent does not have a fast spell. That's crushing for a Rakano deck or a Stone Scar deck. Lifesteal Ambush means that you can pick up a unit, pick up a huge health swing, and then still have a 3/3 lifesteal, which is a stat line that thus far we've only seen on Xenon Destroyer, a card that has Reckless to balance out that stat line. So this card is pretty insane in terms of stat line. In terms of the ultimate, he doesn't provide as much. He pays 9 to silence an enemy unit, a unit in your void, and then play it with +3/+3. There aren't that many good targets to silence in your void at the moment, or at least not that many that I thought of. It's possible that I'm missing a few. Knifejack, Impending Doom, and Spirit of Resistance were all suggested cards that generally have some drawbacks that you want to get rid of, and then once you silence them, you can play them from your void pretty much scot-free. So that's kind of nice, but at the same time, like, really anything that you want to play here is just going to be a big dude with +3/+3. And paying 9 for a big dude with +3/+3 is not an amazing thing to do, but it's still good enough. Like, I would say that if you are getting something big out of this mess, then you're probably doing okay. It would be nice if you could find some way to protect your unit from being silenced, but I don't think there's a possible way to do that. So just making a big dude is all that you really need. You want the most efficient stat line units. You want cards like Impending Doom in particular. And then playing them back as 8/8s or playing back a Knifejack as a 5/5. Pretty much playing anything back for 9 and just like is a really good use of your time when you don't have anything left in your hand and you've been really like spending all of your power. Xenon is capable of hitting this level of power pretty easily. Like, I think that they can be very, very good at doing that much ramping. Like, we've seen Mask of Torment, we've seen Azindel the Wayfinder. Secret Pages, Find the Way is a really, really powerful card that people aren't using enough. Like, there's a lot of cards that fix your power overall, so it's not too hard for Xenon to get up to that 9. The ultimate is not as impressive as the rest of the ultimates, but it is something that creates a really, really big dude, and that really, really big dude has to be dealt with. And that's not a small deal. So as a unit that generates an extra card worth of advantage and has an insanely good stat line with lifesteal and ambush, just sweeps aggro decks, does amazing things there. This card's going to be very, very strong in Xenon. So should be interesting to see. And last one. Last one is number 10, Bartholo, the Seducer. Okay. Unblockable in Aegis. Ultimate, pay 10 to draw a relic of your choice from your deck. So, in terms of strength of the ultimate, we'll talk about that last, but Bartholo's Seducer is in Argenport colors. So, Unblockable Aegis means that he is a weapon carrier. Argenport has pretty good weapons. We can see that there are like, he's got good interactions with Paladin Oathbook. He's got good interactions with Crownwatch Longsword. The best card he has an interaction with is Lethrai Falchion because it makes him into a Silverwing familiar with a unit with a really good weapon on it. So like Bartholo into Lethrai Falchion is, I have a 6/3 lifesteal with Aegis and it's unblockable. What are you going to do? Even a flyer doesn't stop this card. You have to kill it. And it's kind of tough to kill. So, yeah, Unblockable Aegis is a really good set of skills to be married to each other. This card is insanely good at carrying weapons and is pretty good in aggressive Argenport. As a control archetype, I think he also has potential, because a 2/2 unblockable Aegis is something that you can play down pretty early, and then you can just continue to manage your opponent's board with all of the cool Argenport removal spells: Vanquish, Suffocate, Annihilate, Death Strike, basically anything new that comes into Argenport. There'll be some good Revenge cards, I'm guessing. Maybe there'll be a Revenge removal spell. It's possible that we will see, like, of course you can run Execute, Devouring Shadow might be a possibility. Basically, there's so many different removal tools in Shadow that you can play pretty much all of them, as long as you're able to draw cards. And then, like, if you're only using this one unit, Bartholo the Seducer, this card's pretty good as the one unit that you want to play. It plays down pretty quickly, so you don't lose a lot of tempo to play it, and then you can really set up your control with a bunch of removal spells. So Bartholo can just slowly push across damage and ping your opponent over and over again, and then whenever he wants to, you can pay 10 to draw that relic of your choice from your deck, which in terms of relics, Shadow has some very good ones, and Justice has some very good ones. Relics include relic weapons. You can pick up the Last Word, you can pick up Throne Warden, you can pick up Azindil's Gift, which of course is a very good card for ending a game against control decks. So Bartholo definitely costs an expensive amount to cast that ultimate, but being able to pick a relic of your choice is actually not a bad effect. I think his ultimate statistically is one of the weakest, but there's a lot to be said for tutoring, especially tutoring for relics. Rise to the Challenge does not tutor for relics for a reason. Celestial Omen does, but yeah, like when you can't pay for Celestial Omen, this is the next best thing. And this is a really good way to nab that relic, get the Azindil's Gift that you need, or get a better relic. It's possible we'll see some very good ones. With Bartholo the Seducer out, I think it's almost a guarantee we see a very good Argenport weapon. My guess is something with both Lifesteal and Revenge on it. So like something that you can play on a unit and it'll give lifesteal, and then like you can get that weapon back. I think that's a pretty strong possibility. Or it could be something like, oh, this card has lifesteal or lifesteal and deadly, or it has lifesteal and like a very, very good stat line, because that's something that green can do. So Justice has like the weapon set up, and Argenport has like the lifesteal and the other like kind of scary stuff. You could give it like Unblockable and Revenge. You could do interesting things with that. I feel like Bartholo is going to have at least one more good Argenport weapon to throw on top of him. And in addition, he's also a card that carries Beast Caller's Amulets, carries basically all sorts of good infiltrates. He's pretty nuts for carrying weapons and for carrying different spell bonuses and basically anything you want to put on Bartholo. Unblockable Aegis is one of the most nuts like pair of skills that you can have for just setting up buffs. And then, you know, like if you choose not to go down the weapon route, you can do like Augmented Form, you can do Paladin Oathbook, and then you can just do Dark Return, Grasping at Shadows. Bartholo keeps coming back. He has Aegis. It's really rough. I think he's got a lot of potential. So very solid design and thoroughly annoying card. So that's pretty wonderful. All right, so that's the five legendaries. We have one last card, and this one's kind of exciting too. And we will just go ahead and show it here. It's called Sleepless Night. This design is fun. So Sleepless Night is a revenge card. Oh man, and I didn't explain revenge cards this time. So if you're asking, revenge is when it is cast or when it goes to the void, either from being killed or after being cast. It instead goes to the top 10 cards of your deck, or rather it goes to the void and then it goes to the top 10 cards of your deck. It does actually enter the void, so it can be affected by Steward of the Past, Statuary Maiden, but not this one because it's a spell. Digressions. In any case, it goes to the top 10 cards of your deck, and then it loses Revenge and gains Destiny, which means that it plays out for free the next time that you draw it, and then draws you a new card, costing you no card advantage at all. So that means that every card with Revenge gets cast twice eventually, and gets cast twice for its cost. So Sleepless Night is Revenge, discard your hand, and draw 4 cards. So there aren't that many discard your hand activators yet. Privilege of Rank is one of them, and Argenport will probably like that, because Argenport is certainly happy to get a lot of power, and Argenport is also very happy to thin out its deck. The main thing that's really interesting about Sleepless Night is that in an Argenport archetype, let's cover this from all four, actually, because we're going to talk about all four of the factions and why this enables control archetypes in all four of the factions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about its play pattern. So Argenport. In Argenport, when you are discarding your hand and drawing 4 cards, what you are doing is you are digging for revenge units, because you have a bunch of revenge units, you've played a ton of them, so you're just trying to find all of this extra value that you've already got stashed in your deck. You're using cards like Scheme to get to that, you are playing with Martial Ironthorn to ramp to Sleepless Night, and then you revenge Sleepless Night, you discard your hand, you draw 4 cards. Next time that you Sleepless Night, you again get to dig deep into your revenge set, and you tend to play a lot of free cards as a result. So that's pretty powerful. Feln decks. Feln decks have a ton of excellent control archetypes. They have so many different cards that they want to pull, but like basically, if you are playing a Feln deck and you run out of cards, Feln does not have that many good ways to draw cards. You can get them off of Feln Bloodcaster, and that's sort of like a half draw where you get the draw and then you get a card off your opponent's deck, which hopefully is very good because you need it to be. Or you can use like Wisdom of the Elders, but like you kind of have to rely on the blue side for extra card draw. Having even more card draw for Feln is really interesting. This is a huge tempo loss for Feln, so I'm not sure if it'll be played in that archetype, but it's pretty cool, and like the amount of card draw that you get is absurd. It compares favorably to Smuggler Stash. So, and I would say that like as the only card that can currently draw you 4 cards, that's pretty interesting. I think Sleepless Night has the least play in Feln at the moment, but at the same time, discarding your hand also activates a bunch of Reanimator effects, so you can just like toss a bunch of Varas, draw some more Varas, or toss a Snow Crush Animist and try and draw your Vara. There's some strength there. Okay, so Stone Scar. Stone Scar is an archetype that wants to play out all of its spells very, very fast. And it also has a lot of cost reduction spells. So you can play a bunch of cost reduction spells on Sleepless Night, or you can do some ramping of some kind, if in fact Stone Scar does have red ramp of any kind. You can Trail Stories this. I am a proponent of Trail Stories. I don't know if it's going to be good on Sleepless Night or ever good at all, but I always want to try it out. So yeah, just playing a bunch of your own cards and then discarding your hand to draw 4 cards can be very effective, because then you get to play out all of those cards, and later on you'll get to draw 4 new cards. This does effectively draw 8 cards if you are playing your cards as fast as possible. So Stone Scar decks, which are very, very good at throwing away as many other cards as they like, can have a fun control archetype with this. This definitely exists as an idea. And yeah, so I think it's interesting in that respect. So that leaves Xenon. Xenon can ramp to this very, very effectively. Xenon is always looking for something to do with the massive amount of power that it's amassing. So like if you're playing that Mask of Torment deck, this is a card that you're going to want to run, because it's pretty... like once you have 25 power, the only question of what you're doing with it in Xenon is what are you doing with it? And Sleepless Night is one way to just play a Sleepless Night, draw a bunch of cards, play some of those immediately because you have so much ramp on your deck, and because you are still just emptying out your hand every turn and just playing a bunch of stuff, Sleepless Night can refill your hand later on. So yeah, control, big, slow control is what Sleepless Night supports, and that's interesting. It also supports draft pretty well. Like if you can get to 8 in draft and just discard your hand and draw 4 cards, that's always going to be a winner. Like it doesn't matter too much that you took the turn off. You still drew so many more cards than your opponent, and then you get to draw so many more cards than your opponent later. That's kind of cool. So here's the thing about Sleepless Night. Sleepless Night is just a really fun design that kind of messes with its ability to give you power. So first off, it makes you take an entire turn off, which is something that tends to create some instability in your control setup. That's important because it means that you generally just you have a weak point, which is important for control just because like having weak points in control is something that makes the game bearable. I wouldn't say it's good for you as a control deck, but it's something that, like, you know, you want to definitely pay attention to that. And the other thing that is the drawback to it is that since you are discarding your hand to draw 4 cards, like, you have to get rid of cards that you are holding on to. Cards like The Last Word or Azindil's Gift, or like if you actually want to draw new stuff, you have to basically make sure that you don't have anything in your hand that you want to keep. But then you don't know when you're going to draw Sleepless Night again, so bombs that you might be holding on to, again, The Last Word or a gift if you're like waiting on an island's favor, like, those types of cards are a little bit scarier because you might get forced to discard them in order to draw new cards. So Sleepless Night has some interesting interactions with control decks. I think they're going to be really fun. Like, there's going to be kind of like this element of instability to the whole thing where you're getting a ton of power, but you also have this like sort of looming threat over your head where it's like you have to spend your cards, you have to make a lot of action happen so that when the Sleepless Night comes around again, you can get an efficient draw out of it and get those 8 cards for 8 power. So yeah, Sleepless Night at its best offers 8 cards for 8 power. That's that's maybe the sickest draw spell ever printed. I'm not sure if there's a draw spell that's ever been printed better than that. It's not like necessarily in the format that you want it to be, but if you're talking about sheer value for costs, Sleepless Night is really interesting, and I think it definitely enables a kooky, wonderful, slow control archetype that should be a lot of fun. So yeah, that's why I wanted to end out on that one, and that is pretty much all I have to say about that particular card. So thank you so much for watching. Feel free to like or subscribe if you like this video. You can hit the little bell icon, I believe, to get notifications if you want notifications, or you can just use subscriptions. I generally use subscriptions and just check my subscriptions feed, however you like to manage your YouTubes. But I appreciate the subscribers. We're coming up on 3,000 now, so I really appreciate the support that you guys have given me so far, and thank you all so much for watching. Like, it's been wonderful doing this, and I'm looking forward to Omens. It's gonna happen this weekend, maybe this weekend or next, very soon. See you then. Cheers.